Thank you all for coming today to the RiverArts Salon. Robbi and Matthew, thank you for being here. I enjoy very much your 1-minute videos that you share through social media, and it always gives family and what's going on in Chestertown and the world, and they usually make me laugh. So I'm very excited to have you here today to talk about your creative process, how you got here to Chestertown, all of that. I enjoyed reading the article today about you all. And so I will tell everybody who probably already knows, you know, Robbi and Matthew are our local Chestertown celebrities, I think. What wonderful author-illustrator duo. And we often start out with a quote. And I was looking for something that talked about the creative life. And so I found from Henri Matisse today, creative people are curious, flexible, persistent, and independent, with a tremendous spirit of adventure and a love of play. And as soon as I saw that, I thought of you too. And so thank you for being here. And feel free to get us started on our discussion and your presentation.
My goodness, what a lovely honor to be quoted. A Matisse quote? I don't know. I feel so flattered and a little bit
my observation
misrepresented, maybe.
Is that between the two of us, I think we have all of those qualities, but we do not either one have all of those qualities ourselves. And I think that is the key to understanding our lives as artists, which is that we have always worked together, and we both have the theory that without each other, we would not be where we are, where we are is.
Even creatively.
Yeah.
I mean, or even especially creatively.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, yes, I would be a middle of the road. I wouldn't say mediocre illustrator, but I wouldn't be like a great illustrator on my own. I think I would be like tier 2, tier 3 maybe. And Matthew?
I don't like to objectify you in that way, Robbi. I think the trick is that along the way, we have provided each other a tremendous amount of support, creative feedback, encouragement. We have borrowed courage from one another. We have provided this support structure that, in my opinion, creativity and the creative life demands along the way. There are moments when I think either one of us would have given up in our journey without for the other support. We're kind of jumping to the end, but I wanted to respond to the quote.
Yes.
I'm not a super flexible guy, but Robbi knows how to bend me at the moments where bending is necessary or important. So let's go back. I mean, I just want to give a very high view of how we became creators together. I will invariably get too laden in details, and Robbi will punch me and tell me to be quiet. So I just want to warn you that's going to happen. What we would like is that while we are talking a little bit, please in the sidebar, note the things that you are curious to know. What drew you to the session today? What questions do you have? They might pop up as we go along.
Or just what topics are you interested in particular? We can talk about self-publishing. We can talk about commercial publishing. We can talk about illustrating. We can talk about collaborating. We can talk about living in Chestertown. We can talk about our dog. I mean, you guys take your pick. There's lots of things to talk about. So we know that a lot of people have followed us from the very beginning. So we don't want to get bogged down in stuff that everybody already knows. So
but we do want this to be a conversation and useful to you each at an individual level. One of the great gifts of a small group is hopefully we can all talk. So
Mariah, you missed the 5 minutes of the dog beforehand, but we will bring him back.
We'll bring the dog back. The dog, it will be like the treat at the end. You have something to look forward to. We'll keep you from leaving, hopefully. So
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's okay.
I'm playing hooky to be here.
We could also talk about commercial salmon fishing, having too many children.
Yes.
And
so many things.
So I grew up as a kid who did theater, and then I wrote poetry, and then I learned how to play the guitar and write songs and play the harmonica. I always liked doing creative things. It wasn't until my junior year of college that I took a fiction writing class and said, oh, I really like this. But by then I thought it was too late to make it a career. So I went and looked for other things to do. And I decided I would be a teacher or a social worker. And then I was a college admission officer. And somewhere in the midst of all of that, I met Robbi. All right?
Yes. Yeah. So I was born and raised in Chestertown and went through the Kent County Public School System and went to college in Massachusetts, small liberal arts college, where Matthew also went. Mm-hmm. Did we skip that part?
We did.
So we knew each other in college, but we moved in different circles. Mm-hmm. Out of college, I majored in art history and English. And as somebody who had always done creative stuff, I didn't know that there was particularly a there's no career path for an artist. It's not like you're like, okay, step one is you get your degree and whatever. And then step two, like in art history, there's a very clear career path. So I thought maybe art history is what I do as my job. And then I do art in the evening for fun. And I got a job as a research assistant at Princeton. And I spent many hours cataloging shards from a dig in Syria. And while that was fascinating for the first month, I don't even know if it was the first month that it was fascinating. It was fascinating for the first 3 weeks. I'll give it 3 weeks. And then after that, I was like, oh my gosh, if this is how I have to spend the rest of my life being like absolutely like dedicated and devoted to these little pieces of pottery, I can't do it.
I want to point out that I gave my entire
I
précis in one sentence, and then you went on for like 5 minutes. So the tables have turned, my friend. Okay. All right. So anyway, one day when I was living in this little quaint town in Massachusetts, instead of running this way around the building that I ran around every day, I ran this way. And behind the building, I ran into Robbi Behr. I almost collided with her. And we started exchanging email addresses. And about a year later, we thought it was weird because we'd written each other emails every single day for a year. We decided to visit each other, and that was it. That was it, my friends. From there, the rest was history.
You just suckered me from that moment on.
We spent a couple of years taking care of a blind, mentally disabled adult man as part of the Massachusetts shared living, shared living. Oh my gosh, I can't remember the name of it.
We don't know what it was called.
There's a program in Massachusetts.
We just signed up for it.
Where physically and mentally disabled people live with people without challenges as a family.
To sort of mainstream their experience, so they're not all living in group homes.
And this was our alternative to doing something like the Peace Corps. And we mention it here because it was during this time that we collaborated intensely on something hard for the first time. Robbi, we had to get this man up in the morning. We had to tend to his emotional well-being. We did things that our parents said were going to end our relationship, and instead they strengthened it. And I think they made child raising much easier because children learn, and this guy didn't learn. He was stuck perpetually at 3.5 years of age, even though he was 30 at the time. So this was our first challenge. It was also during this time that I wrote these strange little stories because I couldn't ever get over my urge to create, even though I thought it was definitely not a profession.
Yeah, so at the time Matthew was working in the admission office. You were taking classes to get.
I took a fiction class at the college that we attended. But you also
were taking classes to go into something.
Teaching, Masters of Education.
Masters of Education. My primary job was caregiver to this man. But he had a day program, so he was gone from 8 to 4. So that's when I got to do my art. And it really was during that time we sort of decided that since I had a better sense of what I wanted to do, I was going to go to graduate school. And so I was building my portfolio for graduate school, and I thought I wanted to do it in illustration. And Matthew was writing these little stories at the time. And so I said, well, gosh, I just need some stuff to illustrate. I can't think of stuff to illustrate myself. Could you give me some things to illustrate? So he gave me these little short stories that were bizarre. I mean,
but we took a lot of pleasure in finding ways that the illustrations and the words could combine.
Could really work together to kind of to build a narrative. Matthew's writing voice is a lot about voice. It's mostly about voice. And so it was a little thin on plot and character development and all those things that you're supposed to put in writing. And so I got to do that part in the illustration, which was really fun. Like that's actually what most illustrators don't get to do. So I was given all this leeway to decide what the characters looked like, to decide what the room looked like, to decide a bunch of stuff, because that wasn't really what Matthew was particularly interested in. So it was really fun.
Yeah, we loved it. We made this very strange book that we only made 4 copies of ever because it was too cumbersome to physically construct because we didn't know what we were doing at the time.
Yes.
But the hook was set. And so Robbi went to graduate school and I went with her down to Savannah College of Art and Design. And afterwards I got hired by a design firm in Baltimore, and Robbi came, and we were both working there, and we had reasonable, respectable, professional jobs. We bought a house and a dog and a car
that wasn't a junker.
But we didn't have any time or energy for the thing we most wanted to be doing. So I applied to graduate school. I applied to 6 of the finest MFA programs in all the land, and I received 7 letters of rejection because I was rejected by the University of Minnesota 2 times on consecutive Mondays. I got the same letter signed by the same gentleman telling me unambiguously not to come to campus.
We really don't want you to come here, please.
So
it wasn't clear last week.
As plan B, we sold the house and we moved into Chestertown, into this building.
Into this building that didn't look like this at the time.
Which was an unfinished hayloft of a barn on Queen Street, right behind Evergreen, owned by Robbi's parents. The second floor of her mom's pottery studio. And we decided to.
Yes. So we were just going to take that year to do this creative project together, to make books together. And the plan was that Matthew would then get into graduate school the second time around. So he was going to apply again at the end of that year. Now, a couple important things. This was 2008, and we literally sold our house the week before the market crashed. So we actually were able to use the savings. We knew we had about a year's worth of savings to just live and do this project for a year. And then after that, we were going to, figure out
what we meant do. The stuff we were making didn't have to make money. So one of the main things that we tell students or anyone that we are, our creative advice is to find a way to make the thing that you love to make without it being centrally tied to your bottom line. Because the second it has to support you, you have to compromise constantly to make it pay the bills. So we had this amount of money that we were able to live on, and we were able to make these truly ridiculous little self-published books that were just what our hearts desired. So things like The Vast Sahara,
where there's a guy lost in the desert and he finds Churchill, and I don't know what happens in
Richard
book?
Nixon. This is a little saddle-stitched zine type of book that has nothing to do with Richard Nixon. They just mention him a few times, but there's these wonderful drawings by Robbi in this very dark, strange story. No one is ever going to spend any money on this book except for a handful of really geeky
really nice people who went to Tom's and bought them.
That's right.
Tom.
Thanks,
people.
Nasty Chipmunk, which is a send-up of a children's book. Babies Ruin Everything. So Babies Ruin Everything was written as a parody when our son Kato was born. It was the follow-up to The Baby is Disappointing, which was the book about our daughter Alden. So we got to just make whatever we wanted to make. We didn't have to worry about making money. We had a subscription service. So we sent our first book out to 80 people that we knew. And we said, if you will give us $50, we will send you 9 more books throughout the year.
And
it was an
again,
absurd.
This is another timing thing.
Yeah.
This was a time when you could not buy every single thing imaginable on subscription. This was before subscriptions were so hot. And so it was kind of a curiosity. People were like, oh, that sounds kind of interesting. I'll do that for $50.
And at one point, our subscribership grew to about 400 people, which seems tiny and insignificant. But to us, it was cool to know that every time we made something, even if it was a bizarre, we made boxes of cards, we made letterpress broadsides, we made sets of non-leaved books that you sort of mixed and matched to make some art object, whatever it was, we didn't have to worry about selling it individually because we had these patrons. We had subscribers who paid us up front. We had the money for the ink and the paper and more. We just had this we had this audience built in. And so we had this, this imperative to make work that we had already sold. So over the course of the first 5 years of Idiot's Books, we made about 40 self-published books. We just got lots of practice. So I feel like I got the practice that I never got in graduate school at creating and crafting and working with Robbi as my editor at that point and just getting better at what I did. I never did apply to graduate school again because to a certain extent I was getting what I wanted, which was to be a working artist. I was not a paid artist, but I was creating as a big part of my livelihood. Go ahead.
I mean, the other timing part of this is that a year into this, Matthew's boss from our old job asked to have him back and half-time working from home, which was like the ideal situation because then Matthew had the time to sort of do both. I was dedicating all my time to the small presses and the self-publishing. So I was able to keep that going and Matthew was able to pay the bills and we were still able to make this work together. So that was also super important. And
so very early on in our self-publishing, we made this book called 10,000 Stories. We made it hurriedly because we made it for an event at Bookplate because Tom had said he would do an event for us.
And he was going to have a cake for us.
And a cake.
So
and we
were like, we really need to make this good.
We needed a premium item to sell so we could rake in the dollars. So we made this book, which is 10 illustrated stories that recombine in 10,000 different ways. So I wrote 10 stories. Robbi paired them with illustrations, and no matter how you flip the panels in this book, the stories and the illustrations line up and make visual sense, if not sort of thematic sense. So we made this book we sold this book at a book festival in New York City. One of the things that we did is we hit the road, we set up tables.
And this is something that if you don't know about self-publishing, there's a whole sort of underworld of self-publishing that's actually getting more and more popular these days. But of people doing really, really interesting, creative, artistic stuff with self-publishing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think because the tools, it's gotten much more accessible. You can buy a printer that you can just print stuff out on your table. You can buy all the materials to actually make books.
And it's much easier for people to create a following using social media. There's just a lot more channels for both production and promotion by the individual and less reliance just on publishing companies. So the great thing about self-publishing is the creative freedom, the low overhead, the lack of any sort of need to ask permission to create your art. If you wanted to make a book before self-publishing, you had to convince a publisher at a big publishing company to publish your book. And at that point, it was a business proposition. Editors at publishing companies will only publish books that they can sell and make money. All the stuff that you will find at the Small Press Expo in Bethesda, which is every fall at the North Marriott Convention Center in Bethesda, Maryland. It's an incredible event. If you're interested in self-publishing.
If you're interested, I mean, self-publishing, sometimes people get the idea that self-publishing is like chapbooks of poetry or...
I mean, it can be.
It can be. But it also can be some really interesting artistic, like visually interesting artistic stuff that is kind of unexpected. So SPX, the Small Press Expo, is really a lot of, it's sort of run by a lot of young people. We're starting to be like old geezers in this, in this field, but young people doing little zines, like making little things that, you know, they sell for $5, posters, broadsides, like all kinds of really interesting
It's really inspiring.
Stuff. It's really inspiring to see the kind of creativity that comes out of it. So if you ever have a chance, Bethesda, I mean, it's a hop, skip, and a jump away. It happens every September.
Except for
this year.
Yeah. So anyway, we sold this book, which is called 10,000 Stories, with this format. And unbeknownst to us, a guy who worked at Disney at the time stopped by our table at one of these shows and bought it. He took it back to his office, kept it on a shelf for a couple of years. Later, he was partnering with the company Little Brown, and they were doing some subsidiary Marvel projects, and they wanted to do a flip book for the Marvel superheroes. And one of the editors said, "Boy, I wish I knew who could do that." And the guy said, "Wait, I know, these guys made this book." And so we were hired to create The Superhero Squad Flips Out. I was given a secret dossier of information about Spider-Man, Thor, and all the other Marvel superheroes. These are like little kid versions. So Thor is only able to use his hammer to like pound nails into a broken doghouse. And Hulk must only use his super strength to smash cans so they can be recycled more efficiently. So anyway, this was our big break, you guys.
Yeah.
And if you want to see right here in like 2-point font on the back cover are our names. I showed this book to my dad. He's like, "You guys didn't make this book."
Sure you guys wrote this book?
But this gave us a foot in the door with Little Brown, which is one of the big publishing companies in New York. And it created a good relationship with our editor there. And from then on, we had this opening to show our work and share our work with somebody in the industry.
So this woman, Erin, was our editor at Little Brown, and we had all of this material then that we could send her. We had all of we had piles and piles of self-published stuff. So, you know, anytime we had a subscription, we would send a subscription book her way. We sent all of our back catalog to her. And she, you know, went through it and she found this book. Actually, she worked with you on that. She worked with Matthew on a manuscript.
She said to us at some point, "We would love to make a book with you guys, with your characters. What do you have?" And we came in to the offices in New York City and we pressed our faces against the glass and said, "Hello, great big world. Here we are." It was a very exciting day.
We had a proposal.
We totally bombed. It was terrible.
I mean, no,
we didn't know what we were doing.
Bomb. We just didn't know what we were doing.
Yeah.
And so we had this proposal that was like a bunch of ridiculous ideas. At the time, we had a what is it called? An agent.
Oh, yeah.
An agent who she had the different, like opposite instincts than I think what
it was a bad
we
match.
were best suited
It was a bad
to.
match.
Yes, it was a bad match. So she had us put together this proposal that was full of like these crazy zany ideas, including like Chris Christie and the bridge. It was, I mean, it was just so bananas. Yeah. But anyway, in spite of all that, Erin still liked us after that meeting. And so, but the one thing that she saw was this book, Babies Ruin Everything. And she said, you know, almost everything that's inside, not really appropriate for a children's book. But that title is a real catchy title. Maybe we could make a book out of that.
So she said, Matthew, see if you can take the manuscript for that book, take out all of the scary, untoward, non-child, adult parody language, and see if you can preserve and make a story appropriate for children.
Yes.
And eventually we did. And so we have and actually it's not Little Brown, because our editor left Little Brown and moved to Macmillan in the midst of this book coming to be. So this book was actually published by Macmillan, Baby Zoo and Everything, in a very different style. Robbi's original style was very crude and satirical.
This one was supposed to be like from the point of view of the older sibling when she gets a new baby brother, right? So it's drawn as if she drew it.
And this one has to be appealing to actual children. But we did this book, and this was our sort of big break as creators, with our names on the actual cover of the book, with our own characters, with Robbi's own art. So this was getting the ball rolling to a certain extent on the publishing front. That's not entirely true. The very first thing that we published in the commercial publishing world was actually a commercial version of 10,000 Stories.
So, I mean, props to Tom for making us make that book.
That's right.
So that we could sell it at the book plate.
So this was published by Chronicle Books, which is a beautiful boutique publisher in San Francisco that makes just extraordinary, beautiful stuff. And this for us was a really cool opportunity. We'd always admired their stuff. This book, though, guys, they only printed 2,500 copies of this book, and they're still available. So it was not a commercial success. And what happened was, our agent and editor told us Barnes & Noble rejected this book because they didn't know where or how to shelve it. It was too big. Yeah. It was too awkward.
Well,
they didn't know how.
Also, like, it looks like a kid's book, and then you open it up and the first page is like boozing it up at the office. So that was like, they were just like, we don't know what to do with this book.
So we love how it turned out. It's gorgeous. It was an utter commercial failure. Baby Zoo and Everything, utter commercial failure, you guys. Our editor had bought a 2-book contract because she wanted to make a sequel to Baby Zoo and Everything.
Like Babies Ruin Christmas or Babies Ruin Our Trip to the Beach.
But we were just offered the opportunity to buy thousands of copies of this quite inexpensively because they're trying to get rid of it. So we have many, many boxes downstairs of Baby Zoo and Everything. I think what the thing is, publishers and editors know that it's not just about publishing the first book. It's about creating an identity for their authors. And they know that unless they get incredibly lucky, the first book is not going to be the book. The second book might not be the book. So the next thing we did with Erin, our editor at Little Brown, or Macmillan, was Everywhere Wonder. And this is a book we actually developed to self-publish, but we showed it to our agent, our newer agent, who we love and adore and feel great kinship with.
Yes.
And she said, wait a second, guys, don't publish that yourselves. We want to send it to Erin. I think there's something cool happening there. And so Everywhere Wonder, which is this book about a little boy who is exploring the world first in his imagination and through reading books and the internet, who knows what. He's going to all of the grand and beautiful places in the world. And then halfway through the book, he goes and looks outside his window and he sees, oh, look, there's Chestertown. There is Stam's Hall. There is the fountain. This is a book about exploring the wonders of the world, taking them in and sharing them with others. And weirdly, this has been our most successful book commercially so far. This is the book.
Weirdly. I mean, it's a great
it's not what we expected.
Yes,
though.
we did not expect this one to be.
But this is the book that we get royalty checks for. Whereas none of the way it works is if an editor or a publisher acquires a book from you, you get a certain amount of money up front, which is your advance. And then you don't get paid any more unless the book is very successful. And 1 in every book, 8 books or so, does well enough to actually pay back in advance and lead to royalties. And this book has. This book has been read by the drag queen Jujubee for this online festival. It is being featured in Virginia PBS show by this husband and wife who do musical storytelling in the fall. It was chosen by Pratt Library for a citywide celebration that was supposed to be last spring and has been postponed to next spring, but it's captured the imagination of many people. It's not what we expected. It's almost impossible to predict whether a book is going to be successful.
I know. And the interesting thing about that one is that was its own contract. Yeah. So when we said that Babies Ruin Everything was part of a 2-book contract, Erin still didn't know that this was going to be a failure. So she bought this as a separate contract. And then we had this lingering second book for the Babies Ruin Everything contract that was supposed to be another Babies Ruin book. and that she was like, well, it's not worth investing in that. So for years we were sort of like, what is the second book going to be? And
then we found out. This is the dramatic segue to Robbi's childhood growing up on the Alaskan tundra. You guys, when Robbi was 18 months old, her parents dragged her to the Alaskan tundra with a brother and sister, and they
Yes. Oh, by the way, Sybil's family is responsible for that. So Sybil's uncles.
Darn it, Sybil! Darn it, Sybil!
Went to Alaska together as kids. My dad met Sybil's. Oh my gosh, your grandfather, is that how it is? Met Sybil's grandfather on the streets of Chestertown. My dad was scraping a piece of quarter-round molding on our porch. And Sybil's grandfather said, any man who would reuse a piece of quarter-inch molding instead of just buying a new piece for like 12 cents a foot would do great in Alaska.
The less polite way of saying it is crazy enough to go spend his summers on Alaska. I married into this nonsense. It's one of the best things we do. But for the second book in the Babies Who Are in Everything contract, we created Sunrise Summer, which is an autobiographical accounting of our daughter Alden's first summer, sort of going from
she didn't write it, so it's not autobiographical.
That's true, but it's a biographical accounting, excuse me, of Alden, and it's about Robbi's siblings are in this book.
None of these things actually happened.
What do you mean?
It's roughly based on like in the movies.
There's Robbi and Alden picking fish. So people have always been fascinated about Alaska. We wanted to create a book that told the story in a way that we could share some of the images from up there and evoke the
Mariah, historical fiction. Although I do want to point out that this event actually happened. A rope had broken and our net was going out into the water, and my brother and sister and I were lined up trying to keep the net from washing away in the tide. And Matthew was taking pictures, reference pictures for this book. And my brother was like, are you kidding me? Get over here and start pulling on this rope.
Art trumps your rope difficulties, Robbi's brother. So in any case, this was supposed to come out this past June, but Macmillan moved it to next April because they, first of all, would have had a very difficult time getting attention for the book. And they didn't want to release it when we would not be going to Alaska ourselves. So this is coming out next spring. The other series that we have been working on over the past 5 years or so is the Real Mccoys. This is a middle grade series, and this is our version of a graphic novel.
So middle grade means 2nd to 5th or 6th grade or so. So it's basically kids who are reading on their own for the most part, although obviously younger kids get this book read to them. It's a mystery series. It's got lots and lots of pictures. It's got about 1,000 illustrations in it. So I worked really hard, you guys. I like to get my props for that. Also, I also designed this. So I didn't just do the illustration, I did the design, the layout, in part because trying to pass this back and forth to a designer would be impossible. But also I had, a couple years of design under my belt as like a professional designer. I worked at this company with Matthew as a designer. And then all of my time doing Idiots Books and Bobbly Books, I was doing all the design for that stuff. So another thing that the self-publishing did was it really, I had to learn on the job how to do a lot of these things. And we would have never been able to make this book without the 10 years that we did self-publishing.
Never.
Right?
And it would be very difficult if an author proposed a book like this with this degree of illustration density for the publisher to find an illustrator willing to do it.
Or a designer willing to also, willing to add the cost of a designer into that book.
This is a book that is really possible because we both worked closely together, because we believed in this book and wanted to work extremely hard and many hours to make it happen. So it was very well received. It got great reviews from the critics that matter. Like there's a certain handful of critics that the librarians pay the most attention to. It got starred reviews from those critics. It was nominated for a bunch of state level book awards. It was nominated for the Black Eyed Susan Award in Maryland. And I tell you this because it created nice local visibility for us and gave us many opportunities to go to elementary schools. So over the past 3 years, the number of visits that we have made has gone up exponentially each year. Our fee has gone up exponentially.
Not exponentially, just in small increments.
It has gone up a lot. So I guess the thing is—
we're still quite affordable.
The thing is, before that was not a business model. Now visiting schools and doing presentations is actually something we get paid for. We used to just give that away, and it was a great way to create visibility and connections, but now it's actually part of our revenue stream. So as successful as this book was, Erin had originally acquired 2 books when series are acquired by editors, they usually acquire 2 books to make sure that it gets a chance to be established as a series. So the first book did well enough that Aaron acquired a 3rd book in the series, but that's where it ended. The 3rd book did not sell well enough. The 2nd book did not sell well enough to pay off the advances. And so Aaron did not have the business incentive to extend the series, even though it was well received.
And it's very beloved by the people who.
There are 50,000 books produced every year. It is incredibly difficult to break through.
50,000 titles.
Sorry, 50,000 titles.
Separate, yeah.
So in any case, I want to wrap up soon so we can ask questions.
Yeah.
But what we did when we saw that the Real McCoys might be coming to a close was pitch a new series, because we knew we needed to keep going and we needed to stay visible, and we just wanted to keep making work. So what we have next on the horizon is the Cookie Chronicles series, which is about Ben Yokoyama. There's a young man. In every book, he gets a new fortune cookie, and he latches onto the fortune cookie with single-minded focus and takes it very literally, and many misadventures ensue. So it's a series that's called a high concept series. There's a very easily describable idea that is the governing impulse for each book. It is much easier for publicity and salespeople to sell high concept fiction. So it's the thing that editors and agents really want.
And it's the thing that we feel like the McCoys was missing.
Yeah.
It's hard to describe the McCoys
succinctly
in an elevator speech that appropriately captures how fun and interesting that it is. So it's very easy to, it's easy to sell.
And as a result, Random House, so this book was published by Knopf Children's at Random House, or it will be next spring, started this series with 3 books, and we get the sense that they might be interested in extending the series even before it officially publishes. So there's great enthusiasm for this. I hope that enthusiasm turns into sales. Yes. The other kind of cool thing that's happening here is that our literary agent partners with film and TV agents out in Los Angeles. And so we have people that are trying to turn this book series into a television show right now.
Again, because of that hook, it makes it easy to say, oh, this could just be extended episode after episode for a TV series. So it's just a lot easier to sell because it's high concept. So, which Matthew just stumbled into. It's not like we sat around and we're like, we should come up with a high concept book.
We do nothing purposely.
Anytime we try to do anything, it fails. And most of our successes have come by just accidentally falling into it backwards.
Yeah, so that is, I want to stop there. We could talk indefinitely, but I think that's way more than we said we were going to say. So I'm sorry.
We were going to be short.
Let's answer the questions and then we'll get more questions. So think of more questions.
Yes.
All right. For sure, the dog. We'll get the dog as the final grace note on this presentation. Salmon fishing, we touched on. If you have specific questions about salmon. So self-publishing versus the bigs.
Versus the bigs. Yeah.
What does it say? Would you
do the same all over again and get discovered? Advice for someone who has a picture book and wonders now what? Right. Okay. So there are lots of benefits to both of them. And I would say that the things that you get in self-publishing, first of all, you get to sort of dictate what you want your book to be and who you want your audience to be and how you want it to be presented. There's lots of good things about self-publishing. You're never gonna make money off of a self-published book.
There's a few notable examples in history, but they're not many.
Who? I don't even know who.
Oh, there have been people who have published books online. They've been hits. They've published them. Yeah, it's
okay. We can't even come up with names. Yeah. So self-publishing is if you one way to do self-publishing is if you already have an established audience, right? If you know that if only I could get a publisher to publish this book, I have 6,000 followers on Instagram who would actually don't believe that, because your 6,000 followers who will write all kinds of comments on your Instagram, 5 of them will buy your book. Okay, so don't rely on your Instagram followers because they don't have the follow through. But
I think go ahead, and then I have a.
But if you have an audience that you know is interested in that particular book, then self-publishing is a nice way to sort of cut to the chase. Real commercial publishing takes a really long time. It takes about 2 years to get from your finished manuscript to something that is out in the world. So if you're impatient or if you have a time-sensitive sort of issue, then self-publishing is great because you can just sort of get it done and it's out there. you have to do all of the hustle. You have to sell that book. You have to find places that are interested in placing your book. You have to, you know, getting it into the bulk of sales are to big bookstores and to libraries or schools and libraries. So unless you have ins already into those places, unless you know a bunch of people who are willing to place your book and order multiple copies of it, self-publishing is really a retail act. It's you selling it directly to your customer. And that is a lot of footwork. So
there's also the production element. You have to get the book produced somehow. Amazon has tools that make it much easier than before to not just produce your book, but to not have to store it. We last couple weeks ago threw away 40 cartons of a book that we had produced.
We recycled
40 cartons, 2,000 copies of a book that we had professionally produced in hardbound 10 years ago, and thought we were going to sell and make $1 million, but no, they never sold. And we finally said, this is taking up spiritual and physical space in our lives.
We have 4 cases under our bed to hold up the middle of the mattress because we got a king size mattress and we only had a queen size
split level. Yeah. Anyway, so functional books are okay to keep around, but the 20 extra cartons, 40 extra cartons. Self-publishing is about freedom.
Yes.
It's about your schedule and your time. And it just depends on what your goals are.
And it's about your connection with your audience, I think.
So I think that it was great for us because we didn't have to have anyone else's permission. We could do what we wanted to. We wanted to make stuff that made us happy. And for us, it was a great way to explore, create connections over time, and sort of ease ourselves into whatever version of publishing organically emerged. We have never done anything deliberately. All of the connections that have happened sort of happened in the context of doing something that we loved and following our creative spirit. And I think that's what's really most gratifying looking back on our journey, is that we've always done the things that we wanted to be doing.
So benefits of commercial publishing are you're basically in charge of the creative product, right? And that's where your job ends. Your editor, basically your editor and or your art director, if you are an artist trying to get into book illustration, your art director, you and your art director need to work together very closely to come up with the end product. And for illustrators, a lot of the time that means you are not actually deciding what pictures you illustrate. The art director will say, we have room for 10 illustrations in this book. I think this is for longer form books. I think we need to have a picture that shows this particular passage of the book. So I want you to show the boy and his dog and them running across a field because that's something important that happens in the book. Like you often don't even get to choose the content of your illustration. If it's a picture book, it's a little bit different, but generally speaking, you're working with the art director and not the writer. The art director, generally speaking, almost all the time you're working with an art director and not directly with the writer. Publishers
actually try to keep a distance between the author and the illustrator because they don't want them talking to each other and coming up with plans. They want to, I'm not kidding, they want to dictate the creative process for two as separate entities and be the ones creating the bridges between them. So Robbi and I working together in the way we do is very, very unusual.
Yeah.
And it only works because that's how we build ourselves and that's how we insist. And we've proven that we can create together in that way productively. But again, it was the long track record of doing that that gave editors the confidence that we could do that. So I would also say for me as a writer, as much as Robbi is a fantastic first reader of my work, she is not a professional editor. And the leaps and bounds that I have taken as a writer developmentally over the past 5 years since I started working with professional editors has been so gratifying and noticeable to me. So my development has accelerated dramatically. And it's just fun to have this whole group of super talented, experienced, geeked out editors, art directors, copy editors, production specialists working on making your book as great as possible. The other huge thing is it is a business investment on their part and they are motivated to make it worth their own while. So they invest in the marketing, in the publicity, in the promotion, in making connections with librarians, and getting your books into bookstores. They get it in reviewers' hands. They do all this stuff that Robbi and I should have been doing ourselves and often didn't because we were more interested in the creation. So it's a trope, it's a cliche that people who create don't like to sell. I think probably most people don't like to sell, But one of the things I like about commercial publishing is how much of the stuff I don't like is in somebody else's hands.
Yeah.
But hey, it's really hard to break into. It's difficult to break into without an agent. Marianne also asked about agents. The first agent that we had that we said was not a good match found us. She had a scout who read a book review that I wrote for a literary journal.
Which is another important thing. Sometimes, a lot of the time, it's things that you are doing outside of whatever your creative project is that sets the hook, right? So Matthew wrote a review in a literary journal that had nothing to do with our creative work.
I did it as a favor for a friend.
Yeah. And that was the thing that this scout found and said, oh, that's an interesting piece of writing. I wonder what this guy is up to. And so she looked us up, and at the time we were doing a blog and we had all of this sort of.
But here's the thing, we were so deeply flattered that a literary agent was interested in us that we rushed to join her, to sign with her, without really trusting our better instincts, which from the beginning did not feel great about her. So,
and I mean, I think that makes sense. I think when somebody says, here, I have this thing that I'll do for you, you don't say, well, that sounds
well, my
like
point
not
is
our thing.
That you should,
yes.
when it comes to literary agents.
You should do a little bit more homework than we did, which was basically like, oh, she's actually an agent and she's in New York City.
Right.
Done. We didn't know actually we didn't even actually know what an agent did. We thought an agent basically did your contract and like connected you with editors. But, and that is something, that is what she did. And she was actually very good with the contracts, but everything else she did was not the sort of, it just didn't jive with our way of doing things.
We had a different style in many things. So the editor at Chronicle Books, who worked with us on this book, we just loved. We felt kinship with her. We had so much fun working with her. And so at a certain point when we knew that the agent, our first agent, was just not a good relationship for the long run, we wrote her and we said, do you know any agents who are like the agent version of you? We want the agent version of you. And she said, sure. Here are 3 people who I think are great folks, who love illustration, who love weirdness and wit, and who I think you should talk to. And we started at the top of that list, and we found our agent. Her name is Meredith. And I wrote her a long email explaining us, and she wrote back and said, come to New York and let's sit down and talk. And the match was so magnificent that we just, sorry, go ahead.
Yes, all those things.
Yeah.
But I also want to point out that she, the first time we had an agent, we actually didn't know what we should have been looking for in an agent. And what we should have been looking for was somebody who deeply understood our work, not somebody who had the best connections or somebody who had other authors on their list that were very impressive to us. Those were the things that we looked for with this first agent. We said, oh, she represents so-and-so. That person's famous and they make tons of money and they have lots of books out. Anyway, my point is, when we were sort of interviewing with Meredith, we said, we want somebody who understands what it is that we're trying to do. Our other agent was consistently, like if we presented her a list of ideas to present, she would always pick the ones that we had thrown on at the end to be like, I feel like we need to, like the top 3 ideas are ones we really love. These last 3 were just so that we could make it to a list of 10 instead of 7. And she would always pick those last 3 and we'd be like, those really weren't the things that we thought were our strength.
Your agent is your advisor. Yeah. They are your sounding board. They are your tough love. They are the person who is there to guide you in addition to making connections for you. So we have and our agent is the person who connected us with the folks in Los Angeles for this whole new opportunity. That is not something that ever occurred to us.
She's our first reader and first editor.
Yeah.
If she reads through something and she says, hey guys, I think this whole first section needs to be rethought and rearranged, then we do that before we even present it to an editor.
Let's get some more questions. Yes. The advice for having a picture book and wondering now what, let's come back to that because that could take us on a.
We did go to Williams, Mariah.
The Chronicle Books website says out of stock.
Yes, it's because it's all in our, we have lots of
We
copies.
did order, but I think you can probably get it on Amazon. That wouldn't be my first recommendation, but I think they probably still have it there. Do you write for your kids, middle grade books when your kids are that age, et cetera, or will you move into YA? Very good question. Because I did start writing middle grade when my kids were phasing into that age. So the Real Mccoys Volume 1 came out when my daughter was a 4th grader, and the protagonist of this is a 4th grader. And my son will be a third grader when this comes out, and Ben is a third grader. So I think there's something going on there at some level, whether or not I'm trying. We do have a YA series planned. It's sort of dystopian fiction kind of thing that Robbi's excited about.
I'm excited about, but Matthew's moved on to other things.
Yeah.
Matthew also has consistently tried to write chapter books, which is actually a younger than middle grade. So it's first and second graders who are just starting to read. So the chapters are very short. The stories are
like
kind of
Ramona,
more episodic.
Ramona and Beezus, Clementine.
They're a little bit more innocent. Simpler vocabulary, simpler conceptually, and every time he's written one, it turns into a middle grade book.
I can't.
So we're not sure if when he tries to start writing YA, it's also going to turn into a middle grade book,
right.
or if it's a progression. I think that he can write a YA book.
We'll see. I got to grow up a little bit more. We gotta see what happens. So we said how we found our wonderful agent. We asked someone who was in the position to make a good recommendation.
Yes.
And that is what networking is about. Because we don't know all the agents, but as an editor, this woman worked with lots of different agents, and so she was able to make a good recommendation. So, all right.
Is there a publishing analog to CD Baby? Yes. Well, I mean, Amazon has one that
I would say that's the best known one.
If you can't resist Amazon.
So basically, you upload the file of your book to Amazon. People order the book based on a screenshot of the cover, and then when they order it, Amazon just creates one copy of that book and sends it off.
It's like a print-on-demand thing. But there is Lightning Source, which is what we use to print our books, which is it's like a print-on-demand operation. Lightning Source, but I think it's now changed its name to something else, which if anybody's interested, just write me an email and I'll send you the information about it. This is relevant. Tim says it's called Amazon KDP.
KDP, Kite Danny Pony.
What?
I was just KDP.
That's not what it's called. It's just KDP.
There's also places like, what is it called? Lulu and Blurb, where you can build a book with online tools. If you don't know InDesign, if you don't know publishing software, those are going to be more expensive per book. But if you want to make a beautiful object, a book with poems and illustrations or photographs or a personal family memoir, and you're not about making thousands of copies, Blurb and Lulu, you can go there and they will give you the tools.
I wonder if they're still, I think Amazon has probably just.
I think they're a little bit more.
They're a little bit artier.
Yeah, a little more. And frankly, even something like the Apple photo tools.
Or what's it called? Shutterfly or any of those photo sites now make books. If you're just going to print out 20 of them for your friends and stuff, it's gotten quite easy to make a really legit looking book. What happens if you want to be the author and the illustrator? It's you power hungry soul, Sybil. Is it better to start with self-publishing, hoping somebody actually picks you up later on if you're not trying to make a living? Let's have a sidebar about that if we don't give you a satisfying enough answer now. Yeah. For us, I don't want to apply our experience to anyone else's, because I think we've had so many one-off things happen to us. Yeah. But I do think that self-publishing is the place where you can develop your style, create connections, and develop a body of work that are going to lead to the opportunities to be published at a... However, yes, in this day and age, you do not need to actually have a book. You can just self-publish online, whatever content, which is what you're doing already. The trick, I mean, the illustration, in terms of illustration, for anybody who's interested in illustration, the industry has moved a new generation of art directors is coming to the fore now and in probably the last 5 years, where it used to be that in order to get an art director's attention or to get work in illustration, you needed to send postcards or send your portfolio or meet with the art director. When I came out of graduate school, I actually went to New York for 3 days, and I made appointments with art directors and had my little portfolio in my hand and went and talked to all of them. That is not how it's done anymore. Art directors now go to Instagram, and if you hashtag your stuff like illustrator, I don't know, do the research of which hashtags and stuff you're supposed to use. But who were we talking to recently? Or some art director was saying, oh, My job was to.
Oh, my friend. Yeah.
Yeah, your friend was saying, my job.
She's an associate editor at Macmillan, yes. And her art director said, I want to see 20 illustrators that we could hire for this book cover. And so my friend spent all day on Instagram going through looking at hashtags and finding new voices.
Yeah.
So she made a list and then she reached out to them.
And what you need to show in your Instagram portfolio is you need to show a consistent style. You need to show that you have ideas. So not just like, this is a person sitting and this is a person standing and this is yes, you have to have some kind of point of view, and you have to be producing. So it needs to be that needs to be your portfolio body of work. And don't put your like stuff that you're not super excited about on there. Put all of your best work.
And don't put any pictures of your dog. I mean, make it about your work.
It has to look like you are a working artist.
Our feed is a terrible representation of what you should do.
So
all right?
Don't ever do that.
Because we're not using our feed to pitch ourselves to publishers because we have those relationships already.
So if you want to be an author illustrator, use your Instagram to do posts that are, here's the first page of my book. I'm telling this story in my Instagram feed. Like that is a great way for a talent search to find you, right? But
the number one, and this, so I think it was Marianne said, what do I do with my picture book? Agents are the gateways to the publishing industry because editors do not want to look at dozens or hundreds of unsolicited manuscripts. Basically, the agent structure exists so that there are two lines of sorting. The agents sort the people who are interested in getting their foot in the door, and the agents curate a body of creators that align with their certain style or with their particular publishing interest. And then they go to art directors or they go to publishers or agents, or publishers or editors at the publishing companies with a smaller body of pre-vetted talent. Okay, that's what it is for, is to give the people who are looking to publish books a smaller pool of presumably better material to look at because they're busy. So I would say if you're serious about wanting to get into commercial publishing, yes, you can send your manuscript unsolicited to publishers and they have interns that look through them. And sometimes people do slip through the cracks. It is a much less likely to be successful route than doing your research, looking at the agents that are available and pitching yourselves to the agents first, because the agents can look at your idea and say, oh, I like this, but you need to do this to make yourself a good match for my house. And they give you some feedback that help you evolve your way into a good match. So it takes perseverance, it takes research.
And when you're looking for agents, when you're looking at possible agents as an illustrator, you need to look at...
Or as an author, though. Right?
Or as an author, but I'm talking specifically about illustrators. You need to look at the other illustrators that they're representing. If you just blanket start sending submissions to a bunch of agents, they're going to get super annoyed that you didn't look and do your research and find out that they only do scientific illustrations.
Yes, if you query, which is what it's called, an agent, make sure you've done your research and you can say succinctly in your cover note
why they are the agent for you.
Yes, so that you know what they do and you can explain to them why what you do complements what they do.
Guys?
Yes. We have to go.
Thank you so much. I'm so sorry to cut you off. We definitely need to have you back. But we do try to keep this to a time when
Robbi's so long-winded.
We like to leave them wanting more.
I'm going to get my dog because I promised it.
We promised.
We do need to see the dog.
Yeah.
I'm so happy that I played hooky from the other thing I was going to be doing and came here instead. This was so much more fun.
I do want to point out quick in the chat that Kate does know of some successful self-published folks who have a very specific, way to their success. So it's not just...
Yeah, and one of them has a huge following, she says, and that's part of how he manages to sell his stuff.
Here's Dumbles. So,
yes, here he is. He's keeping us very much entertained these days. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Well, guys, thank you. This was super fun. We really appreciate you giving us a slice of your evening. And if we didn't answer questions, we're easy to find. You can find us on our website. Every day we do these silly videos on our Instagram and our Facebook channels if you want to keep in touch with us.
If you just do a search for Robbi and Matthew, but spell it R-O-B-B-I.
R-O-B-B-I, there's only one of her in the whole world. So please keep in touch, and thank you so much for your time.
So before you log off, though, we usually like to end these salons with a toast.
Oh.
Because it partly it eliminates that awkward, like, bye, bye. People hear the toast and they just go.
Okay.
But also it's a nice way to kind of wrap it up.
Okay.
So I think Anne wanted to say something.
Okay.
I didn't know Mariah was going to be here because she was had something else way less exciting, and so I'm so glad she's come. So I jotted something down when I was reading one of your the article earlier, I think in the Washington Post, and how you talked about salmon fishing, and that being away from internet, from what you do normally, just gave you space for insights. And I wrote that down because I was like, Mariah, that's what we need. Mariah and I lately, work-wise, have been looking for space for insights. So I appreciated that, and I appreciate everything you do and for being here. Now that Mariah's here, I will let her raise a glass on our behalf and finish us up.
Well, I think I would like to toast those one-off, individual, unique moments and opportunities and windows that everybody has, and you just have to have your eyes open and recognize them and be willing to walk through them and not have, I'm giving myself advice, not have preconceived notions about what the door is going to be that you're going to walk through, because you never know what door is going to be there until you get to them. So
you're here.
That's very long.
Excellent. Yes, thank you so much.
To those one-off moments. Thank you guys.
Thanks, friends.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Please come back.
Oh, they have tumbles.
Hi.
See, isn't he so cute?
There he is.
You can tell Alden hello.
Say hi,
It's
Debbie.
really okay.
Wait, where's Alden?
She's not there, but you can tell
sorry.
her.
Sorry, we had to get rid of her because she's so distracting.
I said hi.
We will. She'll be sorry she missed you.
Oh,
It's all good. I wasn't really supposed to pop in, but I just wanted to say hi.
so good to see you guys. Thank you again for taking the time.
Not at
It was super
all.
fun.
Okay. Mwah.
Bye.
Bye.